Of this year. And so today's meeting, we're actually going to have the information meeting here, and right after the information meeting, we're going to step into the local area advisory committee meeting, and that is a public meeting, so you're welcome to stay for that meeting as well. If you like, essentially, we're going to be going over the same information, and then there's a few housekeeping items in that meeting. So today's meeting, in the information meeting, what we're going to do is I'm just going to go over a few quick facts of your water system. I've got a couple of graphs on basically consumption behavior, and then we're going to go over the previous year, 2017 financial results, and we'll go over the 5-year financial plan that was approved by council back in March, and in your capital plan. And then we'll call this the Bob and Ron show, and then Bob is going to take over and talk about capital and the drinking water quality report that we file on an annual basis with the Vancouver Coastal Health Authority. So in terms of the Cove Bay water system, there are currently 649 connections in total. That includes commercial, multifamily, and single family. Your water supply comes from Grafton Lake. Most of the infrastructure was started in the 1950s and has been updated probably early 2000s. Some of it, in terms of your rate structure, there's a $615 flat rate charged on every water connection, and then for each billing cycle, which is I believe we bill 3 times a year, so for every 4 months, you're billed $1.10 in water in excess of 130 meters, or water consumed in excess of 136 meters. So you're essentially on an annual basis allowed to consume about 400 meters without stepping into the metered rate, metered structure. And bills go out, I believe, May, September, and January. And then the annual rate is split up evenly amongst the 3 bills. In terms of consumption, so I've got a consumption graph here for residential single-family consumption, and essentially there are 579 residential connections that were billed in 2017. You can see there's high consumers, low consumers, each basically, the ups and downs represent a property in Cove Bay. The average annual consumption is represented by the green line, so the average residential household consumes about 190 liters of water a year. And so again, the green boxes are, you can consume up to 400 meters at the flat rate of $615. If you were consuming about I've just put this for information and context. If you're consuming about 600 meters a year, you'd be paying $825 for water, and if you're a high consumer, like in the 1,400 cubic meter range, you would be paying about $1,700 a year for your water consumption. And that's $1.10 in excess of the 400 meters plus your flat rate. In terms of your commercial and multifamily consumption, there are about 47 commercial and multifamily properties, and they consume on average, again represented by the green line, 866 cubic meters. So somebody consuming 866 cubic meters would pay about $1,100 for their water, in comparison to somebody who consumes 5,000 cubic meters. That's probably the marina, I'm guessing. They would pay about $5,700 a year. And any questions on the consumption graphs for Bob or myself? If not, then I'll move over to the 2017 financial results here. So this is from our audited financial statements. We collected $463,000 in user fees. 49,000, those would be in other revenue. That would be a combination of interest revenue on your reserves and probably connection fees, new connection fees, I think. And the parcel tax, parcel tax is 29,000 in revenue, and then transfers in from reserves of 16,000. Total revenues of 556. Our operating expenses basically represent, I'm looking in the middle column, so from the 192,000 down to the $33,000 line, there the operating expenses add up to 343,000. In comparison, the 2017 budgeted expenses were 548. There's about a $180,000, almost $200,000 difference, and that's because the 2017 budget, the costs for the water treatment plant were inappropriately budgeted in operating. They should have been budgeted in capital. So we got that spending showing in the capital report, which is in a separate section. That's why you're seeing actually your transfer out, which is transfers to reserves, are $215,000, which is in comparison to a budget of $42,000. So they're almost, what's the math here? Almost about 180,000 higher than anticipated. And that's because everything that we collect for capital goes into the reserves and then comes out of the reserves to pay for capital. Any questions on the actual results for 2017? If not, I'm going to move over to the 5-year financial plan, which was approved by council in March of 2018. I was just getting my feet wet, so we didn't have any changes to your rates last year. We went with the bylaw rates, and so 2018 expenditures are expected to be $488,000, and with a $98,000 contribution to reserves. And essentially 447 of that is anticipated to come from user fees, 29,000 from parcel taxes, and 12,000. Some of the 12,000 is interest on reserves, and I believe some average of one new connection fee a year. Again, utilities are always self-funding, so the expenditures and for the outer year, I've used a CPI index of 2%. We'll do a little bit deeper analysis when we work on this year's 5-year financial, and we'll take into consideration what the projected operating ramifications of the new water treatment plant will be. And for now, what I was just going to say was, in terms of utilities are always self-funding, meaning that the expenditures of a utility have to be recovered by the revenues generated within the utilities, and the bottom line should always net out to zero after you contribute to the reserves.
What are we paying for debt servicing for this year? Just up from the bottom there, debt servicing 23.
What is the debt? I think we must have an outstanding loan. I'll look into that for you, Marie. I can't remember off the top of my head.
Yeah.
What the loan is for.
Maybe Queen Charlotte Heights or something like that.
There's a Queen Charlotte Heights parcel, and I believe
Sorry.
that expires, thank you, in 2019, so there's one more year to go.
Okay. Sorry.
So, moving on from the 5-year financial plan is the capital results, the capital operating results for 2017, and then the plan from 2018 to 2022. Essentially, the 2017 large expenditure of $184,000 was for your pilot treatment plant. It's misaligned. It should be down, the budget for it I've moved down into the treatment plant design, so it's kind of just offset to that. And in 2017, we didn't really spend or get into the construction of the treatment plant, so that money rolled into 2018. And so we're projecting essentially $6 million construction of the plant from years 2018 to 2020. Of the $6 million, approximately $3.9 million is coming, $3.9 million is coming from infrastructure grants, and about $1.1 million will come from the water system. In terms of the $1.1 million from the water system, we currently have $822,000 in we currently have $963,000 in reserves, and we expect to have the reserve balance grow over the next few years through new connection fees for proposed subdivision in Grafton Lake area. And so we expect the funding for the water treatment plant, the municipal portion for the funding for the water treatment plant, to come from reserves and combination of the connection fees for the new lots. And then, again, we will revisit the capital maintenance provisions for the outer years based on life cycle replacement of the new treatment plant, and that's gonna come on board for the next few years.
I'm part of the Queen Charlotte Heights people that about 15 or 20 years ago, we had to pay $10,000 to join Cove Bay. And if we didn't join them, we would have had a non-potable rider put on our house Untitled. So a lot of us had to do that. So it kind of, when I hear that the new developments are going to be paying at 10,000 in, 10,000 more than 15 years later, I wonder about why it's so low.
I don't think anybody in this room, oh, maybe Bob did it. Maybe Bob, but Bob's been around forever. Where that $10,000 came from for hooking up Clean Charlotte Heights
Oh, that
back
was
then.
GVRD.
Yeah, I mean, we have no way of knowing
Yeah.
what their numbers are based on. The numbers that we're using now, the $10,000 hookup fee, that pretty much all goes to reserves. Over and above that is any actual costs of hooking up, of pipes and labor and so on involved. So the 10,000 for new lots coming on is a contribution to the reserves to the system and to pay for the water treatment plant, etc. I think it's fair to say it's an arbitrary number.
Did I say it was gonna be 10,000? I don't know what that number will be, so.
Oh, okay.
I didn't say it was gonna be $10,000 per lot up there. I just know that there are going to be connection fees up there, so I don't think it's been established what they will be, has it?
At this time,
Or-
if somebody out of the area wants to connect to the Cove Bay water system, it's a $10,000 fee, plus
Okay,
the $1,500 for the meter and other stuff.
So is the new treatment plant based on requiring that 100-lot subdivision around the lake, and it won't happen if we don't have that subdivision?
I believe it's going, well, the new treatment plan is going ahead, otherwise we have to
This
return
way.
the grant
Yeah.
funds, so we
Okay,
have a
perfect.
plan to go ahead. If it doesn't happen, we'll have to find an alternate source of funding in addition to what we have in the reserves, so we don't, I mean, we're close to having our portion for funding, or having funding for our portion of the contribution. It's just
So we don't
Yeah.
need that development in order to have a new plant?
Can I
yeah,
make a comment on that?
yeah.
What would happen is every user in the system would be charged a certain amount per year over a given number of years to pick up the capital shortfall. So we would borrow money to finish the plant, and then everybody would pay an extra $100 or $800 or whatever it was per year for a given length of time on their water bill until it was paid off. Right. That would be the alternative.
So it's either or.
Yeah.
Yeah, we are working on the assumption right now that that won't be necessary to increase anybody's fees to pay for that treatment plant because of the expansion of the system, offsetting the cost of it. Okay, but it's not a given if that developer didn't go ahead. What they are going ahead with is giving us the land for the treatment plant. So we're getting free land for it, which has brought our costs down considerably. But as far as the actual construction costs, it's part of our working numbers, is them picking up hundreds of thousands of dollars that would otherwise come back to the users. Okay. Come back as a cost for the
We need
users.
to, yeah, we'll talk about
Sorry.
that. Thank you.
That concludes, our projected reserve balance. So as of the beginning of the year, we had a reserve balance of about 963,000. We have a projected contribution to reserves this year of 98.6. Our projected use of reserves this year is 239, so our expected closing balance is $823,000 for the end of this year. It's generally applying what plans we have. or what projections we have for capital spending and contribution to reserves. What happens with reserves is if that if we don't spend 239,000, then that money won't come out of the reserve. Your ending reserve balance will build. So it just depends on what capital works get done during the year, because they're funded entirely out of the reserve balance. So anything that's collected for capital is contributed to the reserve and then taken out of the reserve. That concludes the financial part of the show. Any questions? If not, then I'm going to hand it over to Bob to go over the water quality report and any other questions you may have. Thank you.
Sorry, I don't have a PowerPoint presentation. It's all here. So what Bowen Island has to do, we have to hand in a water quality report every year from Vancouver to Vancouver Coastal Health for every one of our water systems. So
Isn't page 29 for the
page
committee?
29 of 96. This is what I'm going to go through. If you have any questions, stop me anytime as I'm mumbling through this. I've done 5 of them already this week and last week, so I got 2 more to do.
Page 7 for you guys.
Yeah.
Oh, page 7. Oh,
Well, that's
You're gonna open it down.
the abbreviated version.
okay. No, that's not it either.
It will, there's real numbers on this.
Yeah. So the first couple pages are just the summary, introduction of the Cove Bay water system, the administration part of what we do, our staff, and it gives number C, it gives a general description of the Cove Bay water system. Does everybody understand how the water system works here? Grafton Lake. I forgot to draw my picture. We take water out of Grafton Lake. The actual intake's about 30 feet below the surface. We take it out, it gets chlorinated. We measure temperature and flow, and it goes to your users. That's it. There's a rough screen in the lake to keep all the fish out, and that's pretty well it. So you're getting lake water that's chlorinated. That's the only treatment that we have here. And it's actually sodium hypochlorite. It's not real liquid chlorine or gas chlorine. It's just too hard to get gas chlorine on the island, so it's a bleach.
You don't make it sound very nice.
It works.
It works. So in different parts of the island, so for Valhalla, Queen Charlotte's, there's a pump station down on Village Drive that pumps water all the way to a tank up on the top of Valhalla, and then it's gravity down for all the users, Valhalla, Queen Charlotte's, Taylor Road, and Hummingbird. There's another pump station on Seven Hills that feeds Ocean View, Scarborough area, and then on Kate's Hill there's a pump station. The little green thing, sometimes you see the light at the bottom of this road where you go out into Bowen Island Trunk Road. That's not a sewer, that's your pump station that pumps it up to Kate's Hill. And then from there, all of Kate's Hill gets fed. So, and there's different pressure, there's pressure reducing stations all the way down to keep the pressure so you don't have 200 and 300 PSI in your house. So we try to break it down to 100, and then it keeps getting lower, and then as the farther you go down, the higher the pressure goes. Then we'll break it again and do another pressure reducing station to break the pressure again. So, any questions?
What's the most antiquated distribution component in that system?
The antiquated?
Most antiquated, yeah.
You don't have a treatment plant, you're just taking water out of a lake.
I understand that. No, in the distribution.
What's the oldest pipe?
In Deep Bay, my understanding is.
Deep Bay has old asbestos pipe.
Right.
I've dug some of it out, cut the pipe. It's still in pretty good shape. Once we start getting a bunch of leaks, then we'll have to look at tearing it all out or leaving it there and putting in a new system. So Deep Bay and Snug Point they have the old asbestos pipe. Touch wood, we've only had about 3 leaks in the last 3 years because of that.
I see there's nothing in the projections in capital projects for that for the next
Well,
5 years anyway.
yeah, I can't do $1 million project in Deep Bay and then do a water treatment plant at the same time. I don't think that's fair. I don't think that's fair to anybody.
Bob, what caused the poor color?
Color?
Yeah.
It's just the lake. It's the tannins in the lake.
Tannins, so,
Like all the leaves and the pine needles and everything, you know, it gets washed in the winter, and it just sits there, and we just take water out of the lake. That's it. We don't filter it, so that the color of the lake will be the color of what you get. I'm sorry, but that,
well, it just reminds me of a dugout in Saskatchewan when I grew up as a kid. I used to swim with it.
pretty close to the same
I
thing.
sort of hope things maybe progressed a bit, but I understand, I get
Come back next year, I'll tell you something different. How's that?
it. Good, good, that'd be great.
Did you see the treatment plant, the model or trial treatment plant in action?
No, I mean, my statement, I might be coming a little late to the party.
I mean, this issue of tannins and lignans are basically naturally occurring organic substances. And if you look at the lake, all these wetland areas, these shallow areas, I mean, the fluctuating water table, because of withdrawals, it probably has some potential impact on that. But they're also very, very challenging to remove. So the whole sophistication of the treatment plant design that we're looking at is primary to kind of remove those. It's not an easy thing from a technical point of view to remove. So it's going to depend on, there's nothing we can intervene in now to kind of change that. I don't think there's anything in terms of the depth of the water intake or pre-treatment or anything of that matter, of that nature. So it's all related to getting that treatment plant working.
So the treatment plant will take care of that problem or make it better or
We'll take care of it.
take care of it?
Take care of it, yeah.
Good.
That caused some questions, yes?
Just a quick question, I think I know the answer, but I thought it'd be best to ask it. That question's about the color. I'm concerned with the amount of sediment that's plugging up all the filters on my taps and the hot water system and everything else. Is that gonna be fixed with this?
Yes.
filter?
Absolutely. Yes.
When it goes through the system on our pilot project, it was hard to see in a styrofoam glass. It was so clear. So we get rid of everything, and the plant actually, it takes all the sediment out, and we will likely get maybe 5 to 10 5-gallon pails of, it looks like dirt to me, every day when we start cleaning it.
That's not gonna end up in my water?
No, so you can use it as plant food afterwards.
It also, that stuff also soaks up a lot of chlorine, so you have to put more chlorine to the system to deal with those organics. And you get chlorinated byproducts as well, which are not what you want. The municipality does testing for that as well. So reducing all these, besides the color, the aesthetic, the physical plugging of filters and things like that, there are some health reasons to remove that out.
Therefore, much less chlorine will be required.
Much
When you average out household consumption, how many houses can Grafton Lake adequately provide water for? And how many houses are currently on that system?
Well, the houses, we average over the year about 650 cubic meters a day.
Per household?
No, total.
Total.
And we have about 650 connections. This year, I haven't had to pump any water over the lake, over the dam to feed the fish. There is a lot of water in that lake. I've never seen the lake go below 1.5 meters to 2 meters from the top of the dam down. Our intake is like 30 feet down.
Below the dam?
Yes.
That's
deep
safe.
is
So
That's
there's a
safe.
lot of reserve there then?
So there has been engineering studies also looking at the projections based on the use, what other municipalities do. And I'm trying to think of this predicted house, it's basically twice as many as we have or something
Yeah.
like around.
900 and...
Yeah, I should be quoting a number,
Yeah.
but it's much larger than the 650 and the projections of kind of next 5 or 10 years that will, so it's not like we're close to being overwhelmed by overwhelming that capacity.
I have a question.
Yeah.
I read both reports, the 2003 report and the 2011 report. And in both reports, it is highly recommended that there be a refresh rate from groundwater water that seeps into the bottom, because the lake refills from the bottom. It's just not groundwater. And the problem with the capacity studies that have been done already are just groundwater. They don't deal with underwater refresh rate. And when you've got development around the lake, it's definitely going to affect the flow into the groundwater and thus up through the lake. And even with your engineering study that says 835 people can go on the lake at a rate of 2.4 people per house, it's still going to be beyond capacity in the year 2030. That's actually not very long from now. So I think we have to ask the question why there hasn't been a hydrological study done on the lake before there's any more development, as was recommended in the 2 previous engineering studies.
Can I, John, jump
Yeah.
in on that one?
Go ahead, I'm out of the loop on that.
Okay, so first, surface water and groundwater. We think of this as a surface water serving us, right? It comes down the streams, it goes in, it sits in the reservoir of the lake and comes out. When the table drops about a meter, or a little bit more than that, what we find in the summer, what they found in the testing, is we start to get manganese in the water. You don't get manganese from the surface water. You get manganese from groundwater. You get that in wells, right? And we've had it in the water forever, and it isn't a big deal. But it does indicate that that area is a giant aquifer as well, going back into the valley. So this is water that has sunk down and does come in when needed. The amount of water needed for 953 connections is based on what our water license is. So we have a water license for 2 meters of storage by 47 acres or 49 acres of water, right? We would theoretically use up that license under the most extreme conditions of satisfying the fish habitat below with the amount we have to pump out, the amount of evaporation that we could have off the lake, engineering allowances and so on. But that still takes us to 20 feet above our pipe, right? So it's not that the stuff in the engineering reports is not referring to the physical amount of water available to us. It's the amount of water available to us under our current licenses, right? And we have never come within a country mile of getting down to that data level, that level of storage. I don't think we've ever gotten within a meter of the 2 meters before the dam was lifted. Now with the dam lifted, it's even more, and it gets a much more complicated discussion. But the bottom line is there's 2 different numbers. One is how much is your storage, and the other is how much do you really have. And what we really have is tons more. And how much water is available to us, we have absolutely no idea, because it's never gotten low enough to find out how much it would recharge out of the aquifer if there was no rain at all and no surface water coming in. We just never gotten to a point of making a need for a more definitive measurement.
But there was recommendation in both studies.
Oh, yeah, you give an engineer this thing. I know a guy who knows water engineering over there. Once you start allowing for every conceivable thing, what if it is sunny? What is full sunshine every day? How much evaporation will you get off this lake at very low relative humidity in the air? What's that theoretical number? Okay, and how much from a engineering standpoint should we allow over and above that? How many gallons of water does a household use every day? Well, how much should we allow for if it's the driest summer you've ever had and people need to grow gardens, right? Well, we'll have to allow for that, et cetera, et cetera. But the bottom line on that one is every house on Bowen has to prove potable water before it can be built. if we get to a situation where we have reached the capacity on the system, it will simply quit expanding. If that did happen in 2030, it would happen in 2030. But another thing on that one is we haven't tapped the groundwater that we have within Cove Bay. There are wells that do 40 gallons a minute that could be reactivated in Cove Bay area to supplement the water in the middle of the summer if it was really necessary. Like, it goes on and on. But the bottom line is we don't have a problem today and we don't have a problem in the foreseeable future. And if we ever did have a problem, we'd just quit expanding the system.
But once you have your 100 homes in that development at the lake, that was never thought of. None of these reports ever mentioned any development around the lake at all. It's not, it wasn't considered, period. And I'm just saying it should be considered before we go ahead and put 100 houses around the lake, because it's going to affect the percolation into the groundwater. It's going to affect use. It's not, is it mandatory for these houses to have cisterns? I don't know.
No, I think the point on that one is also that if it does affect the drawdown on the lake, having the houses there, it will change the future, right?
Yeah, well,
Yeah,
I would like
but
to-
it won't affect the amount of water you get.
I think it's another answer to that question too,
Sure.
which has to do with how the development has been envisioned.
Right.
And there's been a lot of work done in terms of locating the built forms that are going to be part of that development. They are not sort of randomly, lots are not randomly located throughout the area around the lake. There are areas that have been kept completely clear to act as, to continue to be natural watersheds into the lake. And they will not be disrupted by the development.
Yeah, the houses are being built downstream of the lake. The vast majority of them. There's two or three little things up on one side that might be debatable, which I debated with the with the developer for some point far down the road when we get around to that area. But this is a development that's going to happen over a decade or 2 decades, right? This isn't something that's all going to happen next week.
Okay, thank you.
Yes?
Can I just look back to the whatever the maintenance or whatever you said it is in the water? I remember somebody telling me that one of the other water systems on the island that was designed found that they hadn't accounted for enough tannins in the water, and so their water system didn't work as they thought it would, and they had to spend a whole bunch more money on it than expected. And I wondered, I'm sure you have, but I wondered how you've taken that turbidity into account in choosing the system.
I think you're talking about a slow sand filter. That there's another water system that has a slow sand filter, and it doesn't take the tannins out, it doesn't take the color out, where the ceramic membrane, it takes the color out too. It's a totally different way of filtering the water.
Okay, for that reason.
And that's what the pilot was for.
Right.
Yeah,
I
so-
can see if it works, yeah.
And the schedule of the pilot was through this period of late summer, early fall, when we see this influx of organics. We want to test this particular technology and how it responded to these particular conditions.
And so, I mean, I think this year is much better than last year, and last year was better than the year before.
Yeah, I can't explain it, but
It's recovering.
But thanks anyway.
I think it's recovering after the rise of the dam, right? So, but when you tested it, like presumably you tested it during the.
we tested it. We started in 1st of August, or in August, and we waited till October till the lake was overflowing again.
So I'm just looking to hear that you kind of did like worst.
That would be the
case,
worst time of the-
During a worst case scenario
Yeah.
planning, because, there could be another time that stirs up the lake again, and it could even be worse, we haven't seen it.
So that we tried to do it at the worst time.
Okay.
And also, it might be worth mentioning that the lake flips over.
The lake will flip over based on temperature, so it flips over in the spring and it flips over in the fall usually.
What does that mean? The lake flips over. Is it temperature?
Water is densest at 4 degrees Celsius. You're the,
No, I used to.
so say for instance, the surface water, if it's at, say 10 degrees, it's a lot lighter, but then say the winds and everything, and it cools it down coming into the winter, it gets down, once it gets down to 4 degrees, then that's heavier than and then it pushes that down, and then that's why they say the lake flips over. And then,
And every time it happens, you can have a week of cold weather, a week of hot weather, a week of cold weather, and if you get a very bad fall and spring, you get that turbidity coming up again and again until you settle into a weather regime that's one or the other. Isn't that reassuring?
Well, I've noticed it. Okay.
Yeah, but that's what happens.
so that was the water, description of the water system. The supply of the water, the storage, if you go to page, I have it on page 5 here, that tells us our water licenses. So you can see our licenses, like, we have one for 250 acre feet, 12 acre feet, and 6 acre feet. An acre foot, just to let everybody know, is 325,850 gallons. I had to look it up, that's not off the top of my head. So basically all those licenses, just for storage, not usage, comes out to 330,444 cubic meters to store. And then we also have a license to use 200 gallons a day and a maximum of 300 gallons a day.
300,000 gallons.
300,000, yeah, 200,000, 300,000.
Whole bunch.
So when I said our average usage is 650 cubic meters, that's 143,000 gallons a day. So we're not even tapping into the one license before we tap into the other license. And then we go, any questions on that? Then we go down to the treatment. There's not much to say about that. It gets chlorinated. We also have problems with, because the water line is so far up to Valhalla and then it works its way down all the way to Hummingbird, and so we have a rechlorination station that we rechlorinate the water on channel view, just to keep the chlorine in the system, because it gets eaten up so bad with the dirty water. And my guys, every 2 days now, actually go to each tank and they dose the tank, because we're not getting the turnover of the water, so we're losing all our chlorine. We have the distribution, talks about what we have for how many meters of supply, main and storage tanks. And then we go into the water quality. This is what Vancouver Coastal Health really wants. They want to talk about the water quality. So my guys, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 9 spots that they go test every day. Oh, sorry, page 7. So those are the spots where they go. If you see the little white truck sitting there, they're testing to make sure that there's chlorine residual in the system. If there's not, there's a problem. They'll either go dose the tank. Could be a problem at the chlorination station. So they check that every day. And then once a week we take all these samples in to Vancouver Coastal Health, and then they check for bacteria and coliform. Is this riveting or what?
Yeah.
So the next page, it just goes through all the average of chlorine residuals when we're taking samples, and how many samples you do in a year. It's pretty crazy, but so the ideal amount is 0.2 parts per million of chlorine. So if we can have 0.2 parts per million at the very end of Hummingbird, that is the ideal spot. Unfortunately, without the rechlorination station, everybody would be bleached white at the chlorination station, because I'd have to put so much chlorine there to make it work its way all the way down to the end of the line. So that's why depending on where you are in the system will depend on, you may say, oh, I have way more chlorine than my neighbor that's 3 blocks down. Unfortunately, that's just the way it is at this time.
So that, which station feeds the IPS and Delterra area?
Kate's Hill. So that system, what happens is the water comes down.
That's the one Hummingbird and...
No. So the water comes down to Carter Road.
Rivendell.
Yeah. It gets pumped to Rivendell and then it comes back down.
And then but it's checked at Rivendell?
Yeah, it's checked at Rivendell and it's checked at CB1, which is underneath the bridge.
Oh, okay.
My guys aren't little trolls, they're actually doing a sample. That's the first place from the chlorination station it gets checked. If that has 0, then the whole system will be 0. That's the why you see them there first. And then we go into the THNs and the HAAs.
Yeah, we love those.
Nick was talking about the byproducts of chlorine. We have to add a lot of chlorine into it. So the drinking water guidelines say that we should be below 100 parts per billion, and HAA's 80 parts per billion. We're slightly above that, and that is a cancer-causing agent. No other way of saying it. That's so. We have water systems that are deep water wells, don't need a lot of chlorine. Their THNs and HAAs are like the 40, 20. So surface water, you got to clean up the surface water to get rid of that.
Are those things that the filtration systems like taggers and stuff, will those clear those at all?
I don't know.
Yeah.
Will it?
Charcoal filters will regulate those.
And
Yeah.
ceramic filters.
Yeah.
Not all of them, just some of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But if his system, he packs a tank, you've got a tall cylinder.
Yeah.
He puts different things in there to work for the water that you're getting.
Yeah.
Conventional Brita filters will do the same thing.
They'll take out the THNs and HAAs? Oh.
So that means we won't have to spend a fortune with Tiger once we get the new system in?
Absolutely.
I'm not saying anything on that. So we go to events.
Just a second.
Oh, sorry.
I don't know how these products affect skin. And you're not consuming it, but if you're washing in it, is there I don't know if anybody has a medical opinion on that, but.
I'm not sure on
curious.
skin. I don't know.
I thought it was breathing it, you weren't supposed to breathe
The
it.
vapors.
Hot
that they
showers.
are
You're not
harmful,
supposed
yeah.
to shower in it, which sucks, because then you have to have a whole house filtration system.
Right. So a cold shower is okay, but a hot shower is
I would,
It's the same water.
Yeah.
it's complicated chemistry and even more complicated in terms of human health risks, so I don't think anyone around this table can answer those questions.
But basically, Vancouver Coastal Health says it's bad.
Canadian drinking water guidelines say it's
These
bad.
are international standards, not
Yeah.
just local standards.
This is why they're giving us $3.9 million to put in a treatment plant.
Yeah.
They don't hand that money out. I tried to get a water treatment plant when I chaired this board in 2003. And this is how long it's taken for us to get to a point where the system was big enough and the dangers were great enough for them to actually finally come through and give us the money. But it's not like we haven't been trying. But you can see the amount of money involved. It's just you have to have them. But anyway, that's why they're here. It's because they recognize the problem.
The good news is you're not the highest ones. How's that? So we go into, it talks about the grant that we got, the 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. So that's for hopefully our water treatment plant. The hydrants,
Yeah.
we tear the water, fire hydrants apart every second year. A complete tear down, and then They're serviced so that when the fire department shows up, they work, which is very important. And for advisories, the April to May is water main flushing. So we try to get as much sediment, when you're asking about the sediment, out of the lines every year. So we do it twice a year, and we do it in the fall again. But you'd be quite surprised when you start turning on the first hydrant how dirty it is. And then we publish in the paper the immune compromised. That's the Vancouver Coastal Health. We put that for all the water systems. And then it's just, everything else is just staff, emergency response. Sort of shows you on page 15 and 16 the maps of your boundaries, of your water boundaries, how many lots are actually in and out of the system. You can ask some strange questions, why this lot is in and that other lot is not. It's before my time, I can't figure it out. And then, if you keep going, these are just graphs that Vancouver Coastal, it's exactly the same thing. It's your chlorine residuals. So you can see how hard it is. It would be really nice to have a nice flat line, but it's impossible to do with this type of water system. And then, if you go to page 22, the very last graph, that's your turbidity. So you can see in October, the lake turned over. You can tell that right away. See how it got dirtier and dirtier, and then the lake flipped over? That big spike. The other two spikes in April and May would be when we were flushing the water mains. So that's why when we did our pilot project, we did it from August till October. You notice the turbidity is the worst then. That's what we wanted to try the treatment plant out at the worst time. So that's, rather than running it a whole year, we did it. We did samples for like 2 years, water samples, but the pilot plant was done for the 3 months. And then Vancouver Coastal Health wants me to put all the results in the report. So there's a lot of L1s. That's less than 1, so that is a good sample. Every so often you'll get a false positive. And then, so that's why I check all the chlorine residuals. They'll come back and go, oh, we got a positive in for bacteria, and it's like, well, no, it can't be. I have a chlorine residual of like 0.7. It can't. There's no way. So they usually let us off rather than going on to a boil water. If I got 2 or 3 of these in a row that showed positive, we would be on a boil water, and we would never get off it until we built something. And then, if you go to the page for the first page of ALS, these are just raw water samples. So, if you look at the first one, it says First Creek, Harding Road. There's 3 creeks that come into Harding Road, into the lake, that go through Harding Road. We wanted to try to capture and see if any of these creeks were better or worse than other creeks that go into the lake. So, the first one is the first creek. The second page is the second creek. And the third page is the third creek. Anything that's highlighted, according to the drinking water guidelines, so if you look at your E. coli and coliform, that should be 0. So
Where it says 109, that's a highlight on the first
Yeah.
creek?
But that's your raw water, so that's what chlorine does. Chlorine gets rid of that
Yeah.
and kills it. So the way this system is set up, chlorine is very important, so nobody gets sick.
And that's also total coliform, not fecal coliform, so it includes a lot of like microbial stuff in plant matter.
Yeah.
So it's not human or animal.
Yeah, but a highlight just means an out of range number that according to the
Yeah.
guidelines.
Yeah, the CDWQG is Canadian Drinking Water Quality Guidelines. So that's their parameters, and then anything that's highlighted, it's over.
Yeah.
And then if you go to the next page, it says ABCD Grafton Lake. So in July, which is very strange, you only had 15 parts per million a count of 15 for total coliform. But if you go into the next, turn over to the next page, the lake is greater than 200 in June. So that's what chlorine will do for you, to get rid of that stuff. And unfortunately, we have to use so much of it because it's so high. And then, in some of the creeks, we've got color that's over the limit, which we have no control over. And then, on page 7 of 35, is that right? Just in the ALS, it says raw water, ABC Creek number 2, the middle creek. You see you had E. coli of 34, coliform greater than 200, color that was over, iron that we had, and manganese.
Well, that was coming down the creek.
Yeah.
Manganese was coming down the creek.
That one is, yes.
Yeah, okay.
And then if you go to the next, it should be the very, oh no, it's not. Then there's another one of Grafton Lake in December. That's after all the rains and that, so that's why we get our color. It's 19. So with a filtration plant, you'll get rid of that color. And then there's more creeks. See, creek number 2 again has the iron and the manganese in it. And then creek 3 is not too bad. And then all the other ones are talks about THMs and HAAs. So we test that, the chlorine byproducts, on the end of the lines. So the one for THMs, we checked Cove Bay, Cliff Road, Hummingbird, Miller Road, at the end of Miller Road, and Scarborough, just to get an idea of all of the, and then they do an average of it, of your THMs and your HAAs.
So THMs are supposed to be below 100 and
HAAs should be below 80.
80.
So at the front there on page, we sort of added it all up to make it easier rather than looking at all these numbers and trying to figure it out. So it's on page, on page 9, yes. The second little box there for 2016 and 2017.
Sorry, Bob, where are you now?
Oh, just this graph again about the THMs and the HAAs,
Okay.
rather than trying to figure it all out on all the pages.
In the middle page, 6, 7.
Oh, I got page 9.
Sorry, I was asking. Page 9, page 37, and 96 of the total passage.
I didn't even get that.
Oh, never mind, it's not 30. I was like a bit, yeah.
That's all I got.
I'm doing.
Oh, I put that in.
Good.
Oh,
Yes.
I have a little question. This THM and THA data is new to me. And carcinogens are real to me because I've had cancer several times.
There you go.
I never received, I mean, I'm heavily filtered through Niagara. But I never recall seeing kind of a posting go out to the community saying that you should even use a Brita filter to get rid of these things. Because these metals, as you say, are higher than what's recommended by the feds. So why haven't we been warned about this?
This is posted every year, and it's on our website.
Yeah, but if you do a boil water advisory, everyone knows what that is. To me, this is like even more serious than the diarrhea for a bit.
I've never been asked from Vancouver Coastal Health, which is not an excuse, but sorry, I've never posted it.
I think could maybe the committee consider that, because the carcinogen is actually a medical carcinogen that you notify that's in.
The water advisories?
Yeah, but that's not every year.
Yeah, we do that 4 times a year. The posting of water advisory were published quarterly, advising water users with compromised immune system to ensure their drinking water is boiled, filtered, or distilled.
Right, but that's if you're compromised immune, but if you're just a normal human being and don't want to expose yourself to carcinogen, you're saying that you've got THMs measurable in this chart. And
But you have to remember that it's a drinking water guideline. It's not, they call it a guideline.
It's a good point, though, and I think we can discuss it at the committee level in terms of, you know, and just to jump ahead, I think we would talk to Coastal Health about what their advice was, or federally, there's advice as well from around Canada on some of these issues. So, you know, it's hard to be an expert on what these numbers actually mean and what a guideline and what is being over a guideline in terms of human health risk. Obviously, they have a guideline for a reason. So, but we can go to people that have that expertise.
yeah, that would be great, because if you go to events with exposure, that's
I'd tag her to buy lunch for that meeting for sure.
Thank you.
You got another question?
Yeah, I'm curious about why there is no human activity allowed in the reservoir for Vancouver, but Grafton is full of swimmers and dogs.
Do you want me to handle?
Yeah.
We,
Got the history very there.
so we went to the RCMP and we said, we're gonna make a bylaw saying you can't swim in the lake, right? And we want you to enforce it. And they said, well, the lake isn't actually yours. The lake is the province's, right? All waterways are under provincial legislation. So the way that we handle this is the shoreline around the lake. But in this case, it's private property. So you would, if the owner of the property asks us to enforce their no trespassing, and if the municipality wanted us to do it, I could check with my commanding officer and see if there was something we can do for you. But of course, the owner around the lake was inviting people to come and look at the property, which was going through a rezoning application to put in a subdivision. So if the guy had put up a bunch of no trespassing signs while he was applying for rezoning, it would have looked pretty fishy to people saying, well, what's he trying to hide in there, right? So he declined to put up no trespassing signs. And we had actually no way of doing it. So I started scouting other jurisdictions and how they'd gotten around it and what they'd come up with. People swim in drinking water reservoirs everywhere. I mean, it's just, you can't, it doesn't matter if it's on the prairies, it's in England, it's like every place that I found a reference to it. There were people demanding their right to swim in the water reservoirs. So the Vancouver gets around it because they own all the land around it, right? And it's a very unique situation throughout the world. So we're not able to emulate Vancouver's watershed on this one.
I think to also add, I mean, there's been no historical issues in terms of contamination identified from swimming activity in Grafton Lake. And if you want to weigh the kind of risks, it's probably more the Central Valley land use in terms of rural land use, backyard chicken coops, old septic fields and things like that. That's a bigger risk to the lake than it is to swimmers.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Any others?
I have nothing else to say, so you can ask any more questions.
I'm sorry, did I miss, I'm sorry I was late. The timeline on the new treatment center, is there one? I'm sorry if this was already discussed, I can talk to somebody after.
Yeah, Bob, when are we gonna get that water treatment plant?
Do you wanna finish this and do that at the other meeting? Or,
I think, I mean, we have
Okay.
the public's attention here, why don't you want to speak?
so what's happened so far is, we did a pilot project, we did a little mini one.
Yeah.
It worked out very well. Now what's gonna happen is, we've did test holes for the land around where we wanna build the plant. The engineer has sort of drawn up a rough idea. We've got sort of like a cost-C estimate of what everything is gonna be, but we're just sitting on our hands because we don't have land yet.
You don't have the land secured yet?
No.
Yeah. I see.
The rezoning is approved, but it's subject to a subdivision now, right? The actual, it has.
I don't know.
Actually, it
That's
has to be
on my-
registered in the land titles office as lots, right? So it's, but also hydro has to come in, the road has to come in. So basically now we're at a sort of site preparation stage, pending clarification of status on the land and power and access.
So the site has been chosen, there's some.
Design.
Design, obviously.
If
design-
everything was in a perfect world,
Yeah.
you'd send out an RFQ in January, build the building, buy the treatment packages.
So but the full budget as known now is secured to do that. I know the 2/3 came from that came from the liberals.
The full budget not secured.
So 2/3 is secured through grants.
Yeah,
We've got, for the other 1/3, which is a municipal contribution,
yeah,
we have half of that in reserves.
okay,
And part of it is contemplated to come from new connection fees.
yeah,
That'll be charged on the subdivision, and if there is a shortfall, Marie had just explained, we may have to borrow,
yeah.
or look at other avenues, so we will be looking into that as part of the budget process.
Yeah, so the 3.9 is considered 2/3 of the total cost, yeah.
Yeah.
Alright, what about 6?
So, did you get an answer about the timeline? Because I kind of missed it if you did.
It sounds like it's probably.
It's not a long way off, but it's,
Are we talking 2 years?
oh, less, I would
Sounds
hope
like
it's
2
gonna be
years.
done in 2019, isn't it?
I would really hope that comes down to money and Raj, if he lets me
Oh.
spend it.
Well,
No.
Well, I don't think it's the money, I think the holdup is the transfer of the land. Once the land is, we can't do anything until the land is transferred to the municipality.
Yeah, the answer I heard is
So-
1.5 years if we're lucky, 2 years
So,
if it's a little
yeah.
slower.
Oh, that seems a little long.
No,
Oh, yeah, oh, really?
No, I think the developer is wanting to market the first lots, this
So
coming
they're trying
year.
to, so there's good, like, there's a commercial interest in getting the land.
Yeah, and we're next to his first phase.
Perfect.
So that's the thing, but it does get down to actually, well, for example, Snug Cove House, how long has that been kicking around? I got an email a few days ago saying, it's finally registered in Land Titles Office, those first lots, right? So it just gives you an idea of even when it's completely done, it's still
Even
months
BC Hydro
later.
design process and implementation
Yeah,
takes much
Yeah.
longer than you think for that scale of.
no, I understand. Yeah, that's good.
But other things are proceeding, awaiting that. In other words, so we'll have design stuff done and the site prepped or know what engineering has to be done with foundations and all that ahead of time.
And just to clarify, it's not contingent on the success of the development. The land, the transfer is in the works. Transfer the land to the municipality.
You say that,
It's a question.
oh, it's a question, I was hoping you were saying, I just wanted to clarify.
Because I'm not a part of it. That's my.
It's all
understanding.
part and parcel. In other words, this was an amenity given to the municipality by the developer for the rezoning, right? And all of this stuff actually happens at time of subdivision. So because you can't have identified parcels until you subdivide the land, you can't build on something without it being, you can't take it without it being an identified parcel. I believe that is the the explanation. But there's all, like I said, there's the access road, road allowance, hydro, we need a lot of electricity, or, you know, is it 480 volt coming in there?
I'm not sure. But
Yeah.
it sounds like they don't need to have it built for us to get the land. Once that division happens, the
Correct,
town
yeah,
takes
that's-
possession of land.
that's-
They can go broke building it, and we still.
Yeah.
That's right.
And the only difference is we'll be paying for, our water rates will go up.
Something will happen for that extra half million.
Contribution. Yes,
Something
exactly.
will happen for that extra, there's $1 million in there.
I have one question. It seems like this plant is dependent on the developer wanting zoning, so therefore to get a zoning, he gave us property to build a plant, correct?
Yes.
Why didn't we expropriate the land? We're allowed to expropriate land for a water treatment plant. Why didn't we do that?
Well, you have to demonstrate need, and then you have to pay the value, and the value has to be determined, and it's a process. Where here we had, remember this guy was also giving us the Renaissance, whatever, nature preserve, it was 200 acres of land or something. You know, this was part of a major package. If we had, we don't need to build the treatment plant on that piece of land. We can build it down across the street from Artisan Square. It's just a matter of cost and what do you do with the residuals. I mean, it goes on and on. But this is the most feasible place to put it because it's right beside the lake. So you have your pressures, your water pressures and all that sort of thing, all the things that, you know, all the technical stuff that comes into this. This is like a gift. This is like a huge gift to be able to put the water treatment plant there. And so it's not something that's, oh, well, it might take a year longer if we do it that way, or we could, but like expropriation though is not simple, not a simple, oh, you do it for a right of way across land if it's the only way to get to something, that type of deal. But in a case like this, it would be, not worth it.
So appropriation would have been far more costlier, because as Murray was saying, we would have had to pay market value for the land, whereas here, this is a voluntary contribution from the developer in exchange for rezoning.
Plus it comes with hookups potentially that pay part of the cost. doesn't it?
That's right.
Yeah.
The water main was put in 1985 from the lake down to Bellaterra. They never got proper easements. We spent thousands of dollars to get the easements. We almost went to expropriation, even though the water main was actually in. We just wanted an easement over their property. We had to pay market value of that land for that 3 meters all over the property of 12 different properties. It took up, since 85, it was done in 2012 or something like that.
Just before we got in.
Well, that's the thing going up Valhalla there, kind of? Like,
No.
No.
Along the creek and that.
Oh, right.
So
Water lane from
expropriation
the
is
lake.
not easy, and it's not cheap.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Any other?
I have a question with respect to water storage. So looking to the future, is there any thought to increasing the capacity of the lake? And secondly, are new houses, being required to have underground water storage or collect water off the roof?
Can we take that?
I don't, we would apply for another water license to make the dam higher now. See, before, we didn't even own the dam, the actual dam, until 4 or 5 years ago. So technically, we weren't even allowed to raise the lake water. Now that we've got the dam, you can raise it, now that it's been rebuilt, you can raise it some more. You would have to get a different water license, or an additional water license.
Well, can you explain how you put it up in the late spring?
So right now, the dam, little concrete dam, there's some water flows over in the winter, and then in the spring what I do is I put in aluminum stop logs, and it raises it like another 18 inches. But you could actually make that and raise it even higher if we got an additional water license. Our water license now allows us to do the extra 18 inches, but we could apply for another water license. Pretty hard to do when we don't own the land around the lake, but I have heard that we may actually own the property around the lake in a while, so. Then it's easier for us to take land away from, because you're raising the lake.
But all the proposals, if the two studies that have been done, say that all new homes should have cisterns or water catchment, that was recommended in both reports.
Yeah.
That, I think, I'm not sure what planning's a different department, so I don't know what they require and what they don't require in their zoning and that.
You said it was recommended?
Yes, in both reports.
Yes, yeah, so in some places, water cisterns actually aren't allowed, but water cisterns are, like rainwater collection is fine on.
Well,
For non-waterly.
if you get Bruce McTaggart to put it in, or you happen to be a water engineer of some repute,
Yeah.
you can have a system. But if you take the average person and say, okay, you have to do rainwater harvesting, I think it would only be a matter of time before somebody would hurt themselves
Oh,
with the
absolutely.
quality of their water, trying to be an engineer to control their own rainwater.
Yeah.
It is used by very wealthy people
Yeah.
with very large roofs and very nice systems in the basement to do all the filtration. But to require it for every spec house that is built in the middle of a rainforest.
That's what I'm asking. Yeah,
Well,
maybe
that's
it's okay.
if,
I was only asking if it's allowed, if I can.
oh, I think sure it's
There's
allowed.
no.
You don't want to, it's not considered potable water. But
Yeah,
for people that
absolutely.
want to store their own water, rather than buying potable water through the water system,
Yeah.
if somebody were to use a great deal of water for irrigation on their property, they might find it more economic to have their own cistern. But with the amount of water that we have, we'd be happy to sell it to you.
The big advantage of a rainwater collection system is the fact that the filtration system is much cheaper. And you can have a very good quality of water with a filtration system that's about $1,500 per house. Well, your system, the system we have here, is about $10,000 per house, capital investment. And so if you compare both, you find the reason why on most of the islands in the world, they prefer rainwater collection systems rather than centralized filtration systems. But both of them are good, you know. But there is a difference in capital investment, that's for sure.
It's also the regulatory side, so coastal health is discouraging household-based treatment because they cannot regulate across every user, whereas a distributed system is something that can be tested and regulated and managed out. So it's not just driven by the municipality in terms of that decision, it's direction from coastal health and federal authorities.
Because in most countries, which are islands in the world, you know, they have a rainwater collection system approved from a health perspective.
Yeah. No, I agree with you personally. I'm just saying that the challenge is the kind of regulatory side that we have to deal with.
The other challenge is that it is a significant investment, and when you need the water the most,
You don't have any.
you don't have it. Right, so there's this inverse kind of relationship that occurs where you want the
You need
water
to back
use
up
it.
to,
It's the summertime, you save 5,000 gallons, well, you used that up 3 months ago, and you haven't been able to recover it.
That's a whole other discussion.
Could we put that discussion to the Smith Cove Water Committee to propose that to the planning committee that future homes in the Cove have water cisterns,
No,
water collection?
we've looked at this. I mean, this is a suggestion that is made over and over and over
Yeah,
again.
it's
Because
in both your reports.
oh, yeah. But the reality is that we have no shortage of water. For the Cove Bay water system, it is not a water shortage, it is a treatment problem, right? And that's what we're addressing. But water shortages are a huge issue all over the world. They just don't happen to be one in Snug Cove, right? We have a 49-acre lake that's 33 feet deep for 650 houses. and we live in a place that gets several feet of water every year. So it just, you know what I mean? It just doesn't apply to us.
I think we'll close the information meeting and move on to the.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sounds great.
Okay.
Thank you very much, and you're welcome to stay for the LAC meeting.
That, so he can grab that too, so his usage would be twice that. If
Wow. Okay.
There's people in Vancouver water bills over 100,000
100,000?
plus, yeah.
And they pay it?
This is Point Grey Road houses, you know, that Point Grey bluff. Oh yeah. This
What are
is.
they doing with all the water?
Oh, we can imagine same thing. Fountains, swimming pools,
Parties.
washing your Rolls Royce.
Yeah.
100,000?
I mean, these are flow-through systems, old waterfalls that don't get restricted.
Oh, they just go out.
House of storm.
I wish I had that
They
much
probably
money.
don't even know.
Yeah, they're probably, you're right, they have
I
someone,
mean, there's, yeah,
someone who pays their
it's a
bills for
management
them.
company and whatever.
Yeah.
The management company gets a percentage of what they spent, so.
That's right, so that's right. Yeah. Yeah, and people like that, they always say to you, please quit trying to save me money.
Yeah.
That's their
I don't
attitude.
really care about that.
Yeah, right. I mean, I am so sick of hearing accountants tell me how I can save $10,000.
So, before we jump into the items, Raj and Ron have to leave on the 9 ferry, so they're gonna try to get out here at 22. So I think what we'll do is we'll work through the adoption and approval of the agenda, and then I think we'll come back to Raj with the financial report, and if there's any questions, we can pull up the presentation again. We will not cover, unless anyone has any specific questions, we will not cover Bob's drinking water quality report again. I think we'll cover
Thank
that
you.
adequately tonight. If anyone has some concerns about that, let us know. So first order of business is approval of the agenda. Are there any late items? Sorry.
But yeah, I want to add one thing to it, and that is the water conservation measures, putting them in. The thing that, anyway.
Okay, we have that in our 6.2 water conservation
Oh,
plan
good.
and public information, so we can
Good.
work that together.
Good.
Any other late items? Okay, so I consider the agenda approved. We have minutes distributed from March 5th, 2018. Does anyone have any corrections or comments on those minutes? Okay, I'll consider them.
Can you vote on those at least, because we're finding these minutes are becoming historical documents in other committees, so can we get hands up to hear about those?
We bought those, okay, from your motion. Before we get to this, the item 3 elections, I'm gonna go to Raj on the financial side. So you want to pull up use the summary table, maybe on the 5 years?
Sure. So here's the 5-year operating expenditures.
So this would be several questions about what would we do if the Grafton Lake lands didn't move ahead and that contribution was not provided? So we have contingencies for that, basically. So,
We have a reserve with a balance of 963. We do also have another, it's not an operating reserve, but there is money going in for latecomer fees. Essentially it is a reserve, it's just not reported here. It's got a nominal amount in it. We would combine that and use that as a source, and then we would have to take a look at where the remaining funds are gonna come from if Grafton Lake doesn't materialize. Yeah, the subdivision. Essentially, we would have to borrow and probably apply, recover that from the users over time.
and then the second question, what is this projected used reserve, 239,000 this year? What are we, is that J check and pieces like that?
That was the pilot.
That was the pilot, wasn't it?
180,000.
Yeah, if you go back to your one there, the capital.
Yeah, it would be essentially
Most of the
the capital part of the treatment plant construction. But, so there's a 29, the 15, and the 10. So I've got 35 plus 29, so about 65 plus another 200 for treatment, was a guess for the treatment plant. So I don't think we would spend very much, so that's what's included in the projected use of reserve.
It might be nice in the future to break out the treatment plant, because it's such a significant
Yeah.
project for the community, and just, here's our contribution, here's the funding, here's the, and what we're spending on just the associated pieces, like the pilot and geotech and engineering design or whatever it is. I think it's nice to see it in one place.
Okay, yeah, no, point taken, I think that's a good idea.
So we have the actual $3.9 million sitting somewhere, or no?
Yeah, we've got it. Oh, we do? They sent
Well,
us a
no,
check?
actually, we
No.
have,
Oh.
no, of the 3.9, the province, I think the feds gave us the money, so we've gotten 1/3, and that's actually invested in our reserves.
So we're getting interest on the money,
Yeah,
so it's.
we're earning interest on that, and then the provincial portion, as we spend money, they release what we spend.
And with respect to your 5-year plan, the other one, the operating one, I don't see any interest on debt in that. So presumably at the end of the
Actually,
day.
it's included in, so basically the other revenue line item includes
Okay, that's
interest
interest
that we're not
income, but what
invested
about
Oh,
debt
it's-
servicing? Okay, but presumably once you've built the thing, there's gonna be a big whack of debt. Like I'm hearing we're about $1 million
So
and a
that's-
bit short.
So if we do incur debt, it's not included here. I mean, this financial plan was done in the first month here.
Okay.
So, and we hadn't anticipated on, or I hadn't heard we were anticipated on borrowing at that point in time. So if we do anticipate borrowing, yes, definitely that debt servicing in the 5-year financial
The
plan.
mechanism
would
is the
incorporate-
municipality goes to MFA issues it at their then current rate.
Mhm.
And it's a 10-year, 20-year?
Up to 30 years.
You know, you can just,
You select.
if you've looked at this as saying, say we ended up 635,000 short, and we've got 635 users, so that's $1,000 per user. So you could add, you could give people the option of a lump sum, give us $1,000 now and you don't pay interest. Or you can pay us $100 a year for 13 years, right? I mean, it's a flow through back to the client, right?
It's easy.
Yeah, but it's not tons of money.
Yeah.
Right, that's the thing, is we're not going to people saying, you owe $18,000.
Yeah, it's not
Don't
a
pay
scale
it."
to buy.
But we won't know until we finish the last check on the plan.
That's right,
Yeah.
yeah, that's right, you don't. But it's also, I mean, we're getting money in reserves for, yeah, but it's not,
I mean,
it's
on
not
that question,
undoable.
where do we see the escalation cost? Like, I'm not seeing it as in land value, in hydro cost, I mean, there's always uncertainties and things that cost more than you think and take longer than you think, but not millions more.
But
in this
and
case.
we over-allowed them, right? We allowed for the more expensive plant, and then we chose the lower priced one. So, I mean, we're not gonna end up using probably the 3.9. They're gonna be drawn down to 3.7 or something. And you know what I mean?
It's gonna be 3.9.
You-
We'll be using it all.
Is that right?
Oh, yeah.
It's
Point
on
of
that-
Ground truth, right here.
Sorry. It's the actual facts.
It's a nice truck.
Everything else is escalating in cost by one
Yeah.
kind of thing.
Yeah.
Okay, it seems like even if that variable ended up being twice what we're talking about, there is capacity easy to cover that.
That's right.
So,
Yeah.
you know, even if you added $50 per bill
Yeah.
to cover the eventual cost, and you do it for 10
I
years.
mean, also
Yeah,
just a
like
comment on
local area parcel tax, and then, I mean, we'd still have to figure out where the shortfall, people, like if people decide not to commute and pay right up front, because you'll have a portion of people who will elect to pay right up front, so they don't have to pay interest over time. But then there'll be the people who decide they want to pay for it over
Yeah.
whatever amortization period we decide on.
Yeah.
And that's where we'll know what we have to borrow. And, I mean, depending on the amount we need to borrow, we may not have to borrow from the MFA. We may be able to borrow against other internal reserves if we structure it. I mean, that's something
Yeah.
we would have to run through council with.
That's right, because if you're earning lower rates of return than the interest from MFA, it's better to use your.
I mean,
You have to
I
take a
also
look
think
at your
it-
options. There's so many unknowns at this point in time.
That's right.
Probably can't answer.
Yeah, that's a good answer.
One measure of sort of public sentiment was the questions we had tonight. I don't hear anyone sort of saying this is a bad decision, that more people
Yeah.
asked about their concerns around water quality, whether it's
Yep.
color or.
Hear anyone talk about
whatever.
cost?
No, people want, yeah, they say that.
They do.
Yeah.
People want it done,
Yeah.
and they're not, actually, nobody asked about price increases.
really, about what they may be,
No.
so.
So just following that, there was questions around like how close are we to transferring the property over? And I didn't get a good sense of how close we are, like what are the steps that need to happen between now and then?
What do you, how much do you know about?
So I
That's
heard,
something to our update on the water treatment plant implementation, but that's fine, I'm just saying we'll cover that now.
When's Daniel coming with the fourth reading or whatever of? I thought he was gonna do it in September sometime.
Okay, I
Yeah.
can look it up.
If it's not, that's just the proclamation. After the third reading, of course, it's a done deal.
Yeah,
So that's simply a matter of proclaiming it. More to the point is, because they're working on the subdivision now, right?
so once, I guess, the fourth reading, and it's basically, he's starting the subdivision, I was told that he would likely sign an agreement. Two lawyers get together and go, here's your land, blah, 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 so we could start working on it.
Right.
Without it being an identified lot?
I think so.
Yeah, okay. And then getting the road in and getting the hydro in, is that, who builds the road?
I think he builds the road and we'll put the hydro in or vice versa.
And then do the right of way afterwards or something.
Yeah, build the road and then
Okay. But it won't have to be surveyed and all that sort of stuff and built?
he'll likely build it and then survey it. It makes the most sense
So
rather
it's
than.
built, it's built to your specs? It's built to the
Yeah.
subdivision standards?
Yeah, it'll be a half, yeah, he has to build it to a certain standard.
So,
It'll
yeah.
be a two-lane road that goes all the way in
Yeah.
past. And
Because he's got, I think, 4 or 5 houses he was talking about.
Yeah.
So you come in where that gate's all smashed up,
Yeah,
and you go in, you follow the lake along or up from the lake, and then his, right at the bottom where the kids all play, he veers off to the right and we sort of go straight, and it's not, but you're not, sorry, the road is not, that's not the expensive part.
Oh, no, I'm just on the timing.
Oh, I was gonna take that home with me.
Thank you.
okay, and the hydro connection, have you begun the conversations with?
Oh, Dayton and Knight has talked to the usage, well, with Purifics, how much power they need. And,
Yeah.
They've done all that but Dayton and Knight now is just sort of sitting on their hands because they can't do any more.
Yeah, of course.
Conveniently, they're doing another treatment plant up north, up the same thing.
Oh, good, so they're cutting their teeth.
Yeah, so
And-
it'll be built likely ahead of ours. I was in Ontario a couple of weeks ago and I called them to see if they were actually building their plant,
Yeah,
but they hadn't started it yet, because I want to go see it.
Where in Ontario?
London.
and when it comes to the power connection, are we looking at just a single line to this plant and it's not gonna be going anywhere else?
No, then there'll be a main feed down and then it'll likely be, transformer pad for us and then one for the houses.
Got you, okay.
Because I think we need 3-phase power.
Three-phase, really?
It's more efficient,
Yeah,
I think, more efficient. So if you have a 3-phase 5 horsepower motor, it's this big,
yeah,
single phase is this big.
yeah.
So, yeah.
So my right understanding is probably like 4 to 6 months for some of these issues to get worked out. I'm just setting a ballpark and I'm not gonna hold you to it.
That's our hope.
I talked to Daniel and if he gets his, whatever happens in front of council, we talked to Walt and Walt said we get sort of everything set together and then an RFQ will be sent out likely in January for the building and the pipe work and stuff like that.
Okay.
He did suggest to me that Purifics now, I'm not sure what it is, they have a bonding, they can be bonded or something, so we can buy the actual little treatment plant ourselves. He said it'll save us $200,000, rather than putting it in an RFQ, you buy it, you're gonna add 20%
That's
to
right,
it.
there's no point.
So,
We supply the kit to the winner.
and it'll come in a skid, it'll sit down, it'll get connected and,
And the install will be the other part of the contractor.
yeah, so it'll be the building, pipe work,
Yep.
and then
That
the
makes
tank,
sense.
upper tanks.
What's the lead time for purchasing the equipment?
What was on holidays, I can't remember now. Killed too many brain cells. I think it was 5 or 6 months. So, once we have everything together, That's why I was bugging you, Raj, going, how much are you gonna let me spend? Because, you know, that'll be $1 million right there, likely, just for the treatment plant.
That's right. Do we have a place to store it in between time?
Well, no, I would say the building's gonna be built at this time.
So we pre-purchase it?
Build the building and then bring it in.
And then if we run late, then we push off the delivery.
Can we jump back to,
Sorry.
in our update, so we're covering the water treatment plant, let's continue with that, but there was the external review.
Yeah.
And that was a council motion that's included as well.
I've got one, it's in draft form,
What it is?
the
report?
review.
Okay. And so who did it? You don't need to,
Oh, you can, Kerwood Lytle,
okay.
Irfan, I forget what his last name is. He built the treatment plant in Salt Spring. Oh, sorry.
Oh, is that the one in, what's that, St. Mary Lake or whatever it's called? Different technology, but very similar lake, a eutrophied urban lake. Not-
But he has a real problem with algae.
Real problem.
And he keeps referring to algae in this. So I talked to Walt, and Walt's response back is that behind this.
Gotcha, because we don't have the algae.
Sorry, Raj, didn't mean to leave you out.
This is the
So-
WSP response.
So this, he was happy?
He didn't understand some of the things. He said we should have sampled longer than the 3 months, but he didn't realize that we've done a 2-year sample.
Yeah, all the more days.
Yeah, so some of the stuff he's missed, and that's why I really don't, I call it a draft, because he wants to get together so I can explain some of this to him. But he's really keen on, every time he talks about something, it's the algae. And we never seen algae in our lake, in any of our tests.
No. So that's not
Now, if
relevant.
we did get algae, it would clog up the
We-
filters?
It would plug them up quicker.
Means it's-
So, but then we would, you would pre-treat it ahead of time then.
Yeah.
Like
We
you would,
we also have a deeper intake, would be my understanding, than this, particularly the one on, like shallower lake in, Salt Spring.
Oh, is this St. Mary?
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah, so
It's a
unfortunately,
big
There
Irfan,
it's eutrophied for agricultural rural lake.
Yeah, that's why they've got algae. Yeah, it's because of all the phosphates.
so you can take a look at it. There was nothing really that come out and go, holy cow, I shouldn't be doing this.
Okay. Yeah, it seems fun.
Okay.
And then Walt has his response to each of the questions.
Yep.
So some of the, and one of the ones Irfan said was, how come you didn't do it in October or something like that with the big rains, but we did it until the rains.
That's right.
Because I remember the lake flowing and flowing, and I took pictures and go, oh, what do I do now? It's like, and that actually after the lake filled up with
No, we
the
picked
pilot
the-
treatment plant.
We picked the right.
We picked
Yeah.
the right time. Yeah, her data's fine.
So he just got sort of, he was sort of,
Focused on.
So,
something else.
so I suggest we just table this and take it for information for now, and we'll
Yeah.
talk about it. What I would suggest though, if people have in their review, well, say, send it directly to Bob with CC to me. If you have specific questions you want addressed, then if Bob's talking to Gabriel about it.
yeah, they will be coming over, so.
Okay.
Can I just ask, CC the whole committee so that
Sure,
the
that's
answers
good.
will
Yeah,
go?
exactly. We talked about the updated schedule, that's 6.1.2. 6.1.3 is procurement strategy for treatment plant parts, and I think this question arose with the concern that you buy a multi-million-dollar treatment facility, and then it costs you an arm and a leg to replace the filters particularly. So I think that was, my recollection, that was the question.
I think part of it was from me, and maybe that's part of it. The other thought was, if the company goes under for any reason,
Oh, yeah.
how do we ensure that we have extra parts on hand, because it is an innovative technology, so it's not like we just go down the line to the next company.
Yeah.
It
Well,
is
it was,
patented,
it was
so
supplied from Europe. It's a Dutch system, right? The technology originally, there's a Canadian distributor who has exclusive rights for distribution here.
For the ceramic filter.
That's right. So if the Canadian company went under, we would buy them from the parent company who's manufacturing.
Well, are they the same
we
fitting?
need to make sure of that.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that.
So we can ask for your fix that.
Yeah, we do
Yeah.
need to clarify that, but as far as I understand, that the microfiltration system is a European product and the Canadian distributor is the sole supplier. We did talk about that.
Yeah.
And the fact is that the Europeans aren't gonna stop selling their product as long as they bother.
It's something you can confirm, so
Yeah.
Bob will put that.
And what is the life of the filter?
The one I went down to and seen in New Orleans or whatever, they had like 25 years, and it's dirtier water than we get.
Oh, okay, so,
They're not like those.
Brackish water.
yeah,
Yeah.
so there's no point in buying a spare set, is what I was getting at.
I think you can still break them, so you need.
Yeah, if you drop them, you'll break them.
Yeah, you can physically break them.
Yeah,
But I mean,
depends on the price of them, like.
Yeah,
Well,
whether
yeah,
they
do we
buy.
have the funds to purchase a
Yeah.
spare
Yeah.
set?
That's right, if it's 1% of the plant cost, it might be a smart spend in the beginning, just to have, but if it's 20%,
I just want to flush out the risk a
Yeah.
little bit.
yeah, no, that's,
that's right.
It's 20 to 9. Yeah, the clock.
and if we know how much, yeah, how much.
There, let's see where the ferry is.
Probably won't be late.
Yeah, right.
Thank you,
Thanks,
everybody.
Will.
Thanks, Raj.
Thanks, guys.
Oh, he's in.
Always fun.
Yeah,
See,
he's running on time.
You better give a Raj, he's actually coming in. Okay, hot.
Possible impact of smoke on water quality treatment. Virginia, you want to explain that a little bit more?
Oh, yeah, I read an article about some of the impacts of smoke on surface water quality treatment plants, and it just ended up being a lot more organics in the water, so we needed to have more chlorine dumped in, and I just wondered if you had noticed anything like that, or, I mean, for the amount of time we've had it, I don't know that that's really any impact at all, but.
We haven't noticed anything, but I actually sent an email to the health officer. He never even replied back to me. So I don't know
Low
what.
priority going ahead.
Yeah.
Well, it's probably, I mean, think the risk of drinking it and all the filtration and compared to breathing it in for 2 weeks.
Yeah, not, it wasn't an issue of risk, it was more, I'm just wondering if we're having to purchase more chemicals, if we needed to prepare for that, are we considering that as we go forward, and we have tradition, like wildfire seasons, and, yeah, just something to consider.
We could, I mean, not that it's easy to do, but I'm sure Metro Van of anyone, because of the specification of their
size,
treatment and the size of their plants, they might know because they have that full-on filtration system, but
Might be worth asking.
nothing was in the media.
People in, Fraser Lake or Burns Lake or Quesnel.
Yeah, ask Quesnel
Where it
what the
was
hell they're.
black at 9:30 in the morning, it was like the middle of the night.
Yeah,
that's
the
I mean,
thing.
my God, can you imagine how
Well,
much
Fort
crap was
McMurray had to treat way more,
So what did they have to treat? Just the particles in the water that sort of floated into the water?
Yeah, so therefore, there was more chlorine required to keep the chlorine count up.
and more
by the end.
coagulant and everything.
Yeah.
It shouldn't matter with us.
It shouldn't.
It would just be that the filter would clog quickly.
And then we get more.
I also compared to the gunk that's already in the water.
Yeah, that's right.
I mean, look at that pile of material next to the
It'll be
pilot
fine,
that-
Bob.
Yeah, comparatively speaking.
Okay, let's keep on track here. 6.2, water conservation planning and public information. So this was a request from me during the agenda development. What are we doing? We have now stage 1 to 4, and we have water restrictions. What else has happened in terms of the planning around water conservation?
Well, the point I wanted to make on this is that we want to sell water, right? We haven't had to pump any water this year at all. This is the first time we haven't pumped water in I don't know how many years, and we've got water conservation on. And
No, it's a recommendation, come on now.
Oh, come on now. We can't get enough turnover of water out of our tanks. We have to add more
But I
chlorine.
think, Murray, I think you also have to think of the equity side of water, that, that people pay so much amount and their neighbor is using a far more. I mean, I think there's a challenge around that in terms of, the sprinkler systems and things like that.
I get that. I mean, I have this conversation with my wife as my lawn goes brown and I'm watching water running over the top of the dam. And people are saying, yeah, but the neighbors will think we're assholes, right? I mean, that's, yeah, exactly. And I think, but we don't have a water shortage. But not only do we not have a water shortage, we have to add more chlorine because our tanks aren't turning over fast enough, because people aren't using water at a time when you would expect the very highest usage of the year,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
I mean,
it's a challenging message though, because it's the future, that's one thing, so conservation now.
Looking
is
at
the foundation.
TV, everybody talks about it.
I know,
Conserve
but-
water.
It will,
But we have.
and it's also, we're on an island where some of these systems don't have water like Cove Bay, so
No.
that's another challenge as well, so.
But the number, when we get into a real situation, is anybody going to believe us, right? I mean, here we are pretending.
But I think
we have
that's the point, is
situations.
that you get people practicing, you get cisterns in place and things like that.
I
and that's-
remember
Change the message then.
Norma Della saying to me, we're just training people how to do it. I mean, this has been the same story on water treatment for decades. Our water distribution, you know, we're the water board and it's the summertime and everybody's gonna have to use less water. But we don't actually have a shortage this year. No, but we do it every year.
Yeah, Metro does too, right?
I mean, yeah, but why?
I think it's a cultural kind of message at this point, and I mean, I think that it's, you know, you can send out the recommendation, but perhaps it should be coupled with, we have ample water, but because we believe in being conservative with our water.
Yeah, you could say that.
And, you know, just to, you know, have
Yeah.
that, like, both messages.
Yeah, it's
going
probably
out, you
true
know.
to be more transparent that we
Yeah.
aren't at risk right
Yeah.
now.
Yeah, exactly. And-
Because
and-
there is that understanding out there, there's a message out there, people think we don't have very much water, how many users are on the system? Oh my
Yeah.
God, another development, oh my God, what are you guys doing, you're
Exactly.
mismanaging it, right? So we need to start delivering that message so that people understand it, but just because we have it doesn't mean we're wasting it.
And, but the,
People
so
appreciate
the,
it.
but I think what the message is, excuse the pun, the water is highly fluid. Somebody can use 800 gallons a day if they have a half-acre lot and it's lawn and they water it every night, right? If too many people do that, we're going to have a real problem,
Right.
right? However, this doesn't mean that everybody who's using 190 gallons a day should go down to 140 and then bitch because, you know, the kids can't play in the sprinkler, we can't wash the car, etc. You know, all that kind of crap, right? And
We got an email about
it's-
that.
We should have a more
Kids
nuanced,
couldn't play in the sprinkler.
but we should have a more nuanced message, rather than just, well, everybody says you should conserve in the summer,
Yeah,
so
and
we're
I-
saying it too.
I also think we need to do a better job of telling people why Bowen is different than Metro Vancouver in terms of snow melt fed reservoirs, high demand, other, you know, just a different system altogether. We're not bound by GDS and DD water restrictions.
Well, and it's not like the Cove Bay in particular, because it's even different as
Different
you
than
go
others.
to
Well, that's a
Eagle
good
Cliff, right?
point, like,
So
just
it's
to
like
explain it across the
geographically.
island as well, so.
And so we have Bob and his people like the idea. We just say one thing to everybody, and then it's easy.
Yeah.
If we say different things to different people, I get too many phone calls.
It's like the fire sign coming
Right.
off the ferry.
Yeah.
Extreme risk.
But it is kind of just the thing of it, it is a great inconvenience for staff to have 7 different times of 7 different areas when you go into water restrictions. Well, you're on 15th of July, but it looks like you don't have to go until the 10th of August. That sort of stuff. And I don't mind when we have a year when it's a fairly bad year, you know, a very hot, dry year. It just hasn't been that bad this year. Right, Bob? I mean, have we got any problems with any systems?
Oh, yeah.
Were there shortage?
Well, yeah, there's been a couple systems that
That what?
should
How-
have conserved a little more water than they should. So the wells are running constantly, never stopped yet. And, you know, that's not good for a well.
Okay. So
That's
you-
not
you've
good for
got
the
pieces
aquifer.
Where the wells are.
There's like
running.
Okay, I think we'll move on. I think point taken, I do think you're probably in the minority, Murray, but I think there's a more nuanced view of trying to be, you know, as clear and factual with people as possible, that we aren't under the same restrictions, we aren't running out of water, but, you know, these measures are for the long term, perhaps.
Yeah, but when we get to the point where we have to rechlorinate the water in the tanks because they haven't moved enough
Yeah.
in the middle of the summer, when they do in the middle of the winter, then I think that we've overdone it. And we have people that are so good at complying with the request. Right? We have too responsible a community, and we're setting guidelines for communities who aren't very responsible. in a community that is very responsible, right? And so we get this tremendous overkill here.
Okay, point taken. 6.3 was the revisions to the water billing structure. So this was something that was discussed at staff level a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, and then was not moved forward. And I wondered if there's any, I mean, we don't have Raj here to talk about the financial side, so we can defer it.
He just hasn't had a chance. So
Yeah.
he's gonna take a look at all the water systems billing after this process before the next year's budgeting process.
Okay. So we can ask him for updates, so that's fine.
Who's here?
Is that him cleaning up? Might be him just.
I don't think I heard you raise out the door.
Yeah.
Someone's watching our dishes.
See who's taking the silverware.
Whoever
the
it
ghost.
is, let him do it. It's less to clean.
Wish that would happen in my house.
Yes, it does happen, it's just me.
So 7.1 and 7.2 are done?
Yeah, 7172, 616, 263. You have no public comments. We have no public members. We've done that adequately.
Well, that makes sense.
So we have action items from last time and elections. So we'll do elections first, and I don't know what the procedures are for elections.
Somebody has to,
If Russell's not here, then he can take on everything.
that's usually the way it goes.
That's right.
We also,
You are the
we
chair.
have nominations.
Yeah.
You need a forum.
We have four, right?
Do it.
Yeah.
5 or 7 on this one.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and we have 3.
Okay. So you have forum?
I would like to nominate Dave to be the next chair.
I don't have time, unfortunately. I can't.
Oh.
Well, you've been doing a wonderful
What
job.
big, you've been doing it, I take that job right back
He
at
wants
you.
to pass
Oh,
it
I just
on.
want to continue?
Oh,
Yeah.
sorry.
He just
What is
wants
it
us
by
to
year?
beg.
Is it yearly?
It's
I think it goes to December, and then you're gonna have to
Yeah,
start
it's-
all over again.
Yeah, it's supposed to be
10
the
yearly.
first, yeah, it's yearly.
It's 10 years.
Calendar year.
Calendar year, but we didn't do one in March, and so we're doing it now, and we'll do it again in
It's only gonna last till
So it's
December.
Basically a
Yeah.
quarter.
Rory's gonna have to be out of his job, though. He might want to be back.
No.
He's on
I'm gonna come in
camera.
as one of those angry contrarian people.
Yeah, great.
Okay, well, unless Georgina, I should say, are you of any interest in being chair?
I feel like that's a time commitment I can't commit to at this point. I do feel like it comes with a bit more, you know.
What is all
Okay.
this time? You have to talk to me for like half an hour.
That's the thing.
Not
That's
the worst
bigger.
thing in the world.
But that's what we're talking about.
I also feel
Okay,
like your
I will-
background.
All in favor of
I
Nick?
will continue for a year.
Thank you.
There you go, he's elected.
And Russell's the vice chair.
Unanimously.
Yeah.
We're all in favor.
Well, I
All
need
in
a-
favor of Russell
I need
being
a
vice chair?
so there's
Oh, I don't
a-
think you dare do that.
Jay will be vice chair, I think.
Oh,
Yeah, you can't get out.
God.
All in favor, yeah?
All in favor, yes. To go back to the action items then, I think this is probably our, it's page 8 of the package I have. These are action items from March 5th. And I'll just run through them. Send the solids characterization report to committee members. Well, was that done?
Yeah, I think it
I
was.
think- I like we did it
That was
right
a
off.
sludge sample.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think I did it.
I think you did.
I usually do it, as soon as something like that, I do it right away.
Data from the creeks in the sampling study, and with a map to cross-reference locations.
Okay,
Looking at page 8.
it's all,
I know that data's there, and the previous data, it'd be nice to get a map, I think, even if it's,
oh, okay.
don't spend too long on it, even a hand
No,
sketch
I-
kind of something.
yeah.
It's just they refer to like creek 1, creek 2, creek 3.
Okay.
That's
I thought I
not
drew one
that
out.
helpful. You think they would talking to the public as well, so.
That doesn't count.
No, I
I thought I
thought
drew it confusing. Whose house is that?
that's Bone Bay. Well, 1, 2, and 3.
Okay, action 4, invite Opus to the next meeting.
It's
And that was
today.
a technical
I didn't
one,
have it.
so we did not.
Do we have to pay them to come?
Yep.
I do, yeah.
So I don't understand what
I
I'm
don't
doing
think
here
it's
for,
necessary.
Just
how,
check.
they're done? These are done?
The map is not.
Okay.
The
so
first
that's
2
all.
I'll send you out a map tomorrow.
4 is not,
Okay.
but I think there's a rationale for that.
So we're gonna, 4 is gonna happen for the next meeting then, or Alex saying it?
As required, so in the future, I would say we need for the next meeting.
No.
We're not gonna pay them to come over unless we have a real technical
I
question
agree.
for them.
Why gonna
And we
cost
can
nothing?
keep our powder dry for that, I think.
Mhm.
Send relevant reports from Opus to community members regarding the next meeting date. This was a reading question.
You want them for Opus? Well,
From Opus, or is it the review of?
I think if you're getting reports, just to send them to the committee instead of
okay.
waiting for a.
I was gonna give you this one, but it's still in a draft, so I didn't wanna send it out, but.
Yeah, I get it.
I think a draft is fine.
Is
I'm
it?
fine getting drafts, because then we can all provide comments and then
Okay.
it contributes.
Yeah,
For drafts.
give us the stuff that you get
Yeah.
related to this.
I think Walt sent me this yesterday,
Okay.
Okay.
September 4th.
Action 6 was a report back to committee regarding procurement procedure, so that was sort of RFP, RFQ. I don't think I mean, that's probably a bigger municipal-wide topic, I would assume, with procurement. And the possible rate changes, I think that's their 2 pieces. And the rate changes, we've just said we haven't undertaken that yet, so that's for a future update. Ensure that Cove Bay water system communications are included in water bills.
So that they
Basically, take advantage of a mail
and
out.
it's all
If
over
there's
that.
information, whether it's systems, whether it's.
Sorry,
treatment
I know nothing about the mail-outs or the bills.
I don't think we were directing specific information, just that it's an opportunity to reach all people.
What did,
So
I know
Annette,
she said-
before these meetings, Annette reached out to me to make sure that she was getting all the information for these meetings into the bills, not for Copay, but otherwise. So
Mhm.
she's definitely flagged that
yeah,
when she's doing bills, and works with Sophie on that, but I can follow up to make sure that.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking the water treatment, I still think the water treatment plant it's the biggest infrastructure project ever undertaken on Bowen. It would
Yeah, we
do-
should give
it's
an
due, it's-
FAQ.
Yeah, exactly. Whether it's the
short-
scheduling, whether it's the financial piece,
Yeah.
a one-pager would be nice.
One-page FAQ is really important engagement at this stage with the people who are on the system.
Yeah.
Probably the biggest question that people are gonna wanna know is when. And so,
you see, but I don't wanna talk about it because it's sort of, it's a chicken and egg and you can't really say,
Just say 6
Oh.
to 12 months is what it's
Well,
looking like.
I wouldn't do
About
I wouldn't
the
do an
land.
update until you get a
Yeah.
better idea.
I think,
of-
I think if,
we
the
should
end of
know.
September,
Yeah.
if something happens, and then we get
There's a
a
good-
document going, here's the land, then we can start planning.
Good.
so when's the next water bill then?
September.
It's supposed to be going out this week.
Okay, so we have this
One
page.
after that.
There's an actual web page that has the frequently asked questions here.
Yeah.
So is that, you
I
want that
made
so
that a
that to
long
be?
time ago.
Yeah, I think it's really old.
Oh, it's too old?
Really old.
Should probably be checked.
Like, isn't
Who
it
does
for
the,
the
like-
DAF system?
No, I don't-
Questions, or,
I don't know,
I think it's.
can't remember.
What are some of the questions?
I mean, I really don't think, given the gap we've had between sort of communicating, it's that urgent. Let's get it right, but just take
Yeah.
an opportunity for the next mail out to, if we're at the stage of communicating on schedule and budget.
Yeah, this mail out will not be good.
No, we don't have time.
Annette that sends out the bills is waiting to get her appendix cut out. She's in the hospital now, so she might not make it tomorrow.
What's
Well,
that?
not to work, not.
Okay.
not-
I was gonna say that's fire. It's like,
An appendix.
geez. Usually that doesn't mean not make it.
Oh, no, that is, no, it's not.
That's just it.
She's not gonna make it to do the bills, how's
Okay,
that?
just doing a home treatment.
The,
No, that's fine.
Well, do you think this is, I mean, we could print this off and just throw it into the bills even if it's old.
Well, no, is it the right, is it,
Why was
Pure
ceramic
ethics?
filter selected?
oh,
What are the benefits of ceramics? What
I
water
really
quality can I
feel like
expect?
the most salient question will be
When is this likely to
and
happen?
if that's missing
Let's,
from all of those.
yeah, let's not rush,
Okay.
okay? Just
Okay.
defer. We can-
By the way, Georgina,
Yes.
you responded on Tuesday, March 13th to the email you got from Walt about whether or not you could get more ceramic filters and such like.
Yeah.
That's what came up at the March 5th meeting, and you were talking about it again now.
Yeah.
And basically it says you're out of luck.
what do you mean? No, I'll call Pure
It
Ethics.
wasn't the whole story, I think. I mean, I think,
Yeah, but
you know,
they,
nothing European was ever looked at, like,
All they're saying on this is unfortunately they're a propriety. First, the only proprietary piece of equipment is the ceramic membrane and the integrated gasket around the membrane where it fits into the pressure vessel rather. The remainder of the equipment in the skid is not specialized and can be serviced without difficulty. For the
So it's just
membranes, they are
ceramic.
managed specifically by Purifics and as such are not available by a third party. The response from the vendor was, accordingly, we have never given this information out as our membranes are our own design. There are no backup replacement suppliers. So that is,
I don't think that was the full, I think that there was further information
Oh,
that
right.
there were other,
They're
there was
nearly
another
identical
company
to the-
willing to do it, but there's a patent issue with it.
yeah, they are
So-
nearly identical to the Paul Memblo units. However, the Purifics won't divulge if they are interchangeable. Anyway, that was just,
Okay,
So we
that
need to just be
corresponds.
bearing in mind with the procurement process, if
Is
this is a weakness of the system, then
Yeah.
what are the additional costs for getting a backup
yeah.
at the time of purchase?
Yeah,
Because if it does last for 20 years and having another one in storage, fine.
The last action item was review the FAQs and communications material and provide comments to the committee clerk, so we're just sort of.
Oh,
These were there.
so that didn't happen.
Okay.
So you guys
All.
all,
So keep that as an action. Just making sure I cover everything here. Information. There was, just on information, we did get the reminder again that if we get questions from the public, they're distributed to the committee, but not to respond. What is the process again? Restate
please
that?
don't respond, just the staff or chair can respond. But it is, yeah,
But I-
talk to each other,
Exactly, so don't
please
feel free to
do,
just
yeah.
provide opinions on whether a staff response or my response. I usually refer to staff, but,
Yep.
so,
is this an emailed
Yes.
query?
yeah, because
Yeah.
it gets restricted, they can contact the.
They're
Cove
encouraged to, in all the committees, they'll go to the committee webpage, they can send an email to the committee, so then that's for the committee to consider. So
There's no
you
middle
guys
ground.
don't meet that often, but the ones that meet monthly, it's a regular part of their meetings to consider that, and then someone would be assigned to it.
And the question we got that you sent to us
Yeah.
today was the one who was here, who was asking the same
Yeah.
question again.
And so Bob responded to her.
Good job, Bob.
Let us know.
Yeah.
Well, I just sent her all the reports, and she complained it was too much reading.
You said, I know.
Next,
I agree.
so that's it except for the next meeting. So what is our general schedule? Does anyone,
Well, they're
Is
supposed
there
to meet once a year, you guys,
I feel like we should meet more
More
frequently.
than that, so it's
up to
Especially
you.
as
Yeah.
we get closer to.
Grafton Lakelands,
Twice a year.
subdivision being planned and things like that?
Yeah, I mean,
Well,
March?
maybe every, oh,
The spring one again?
I think we should go sooner, much sooner.
well, the way I've tried to do it before is everybody on the committee submits things that they think should be on the next agenda, right? And then if staff has something that is a date that's coming up that we will need information on this or we'll need information on that. But generally, when the chair sees that there's enough stuff on the agenda to have a meeting,
So
and,
don't
you
pick
know,
don't pick a date until it's.
yeah, and you might get to a point where you say, okay, we've got to deal with frequently asked questions. Everybody give me a few questions. And then bug everybody to do it. That sort of thing, and then
Okay.
that becomes.
So what I'll
an
suggest
action.
is,
Well,
we'll schedule for March unless we get
Oh,
a
it should
number
be
of
before
items.
that.
yeah,
No,
so
but
by
that would be the
January,
back.
you're doing your update.
Yeah, I would say likely November or something like that.
Why don't we just schedule for November?
fine, let's pick a date, do it.
Because if things are going, then I would bring Walt over and go, and because I've seen his plans, he hasn't given them me, but I've seen his plans, the way he wants to lay out the building and that. And he's got his little cartoon sketch of the building, it's like, oh, yeah, that would work.
Make it before
No. I'm-
November 4th.
Oh, okay.
Right.
I'm gone by then.
Yeah, we won't have a council liaison then.
How does that happen?
Actually, there was, and I,
Before the election, sorry, go ahead.
yeah, I think
Somebody else is.
It'll be
it was mentioned that there would be no committee meetings in November. Kathy
Well,
mentioned that during a committee meeting that
Council
was.
liaison until the new year, I would presume.
Yeah, so it,
Well, it could be December. There's the inauguration on like the 4th of November, and then the first business meeting is the next week or 2 weeks thereafter. And so it'll depend on the mayor of the day and how enthusiastic.
But December is challenging too, so I usually end up being January. So let's
think
say the first 2 weeks of January, let's pick a date.
Bob wants to
Hopefully
meet
after
before
the
then.
19th. No, I'm gone the 19th of January.
Okay. I mean, I'm just picking a date now, but we can always move it up if there is an
Yeah.
issue that needs some direction from the committee, okay?
Even if it's just an information meeting, you should have one. It'll be exciting to see something.
Yes, yes,
Wednesday, January 9th.
yes.
Okay.
Oh,
Hold on a
I'll be
second
in Mexico.
here, just a moment.
I just got my flight today.
I've got
Philippines.
recreation like Wednesdays,
The
meeting at
Philippines.
5 o'clock.
I love that.
Not Philadelphia?
So,
No, not Philadelphia.
let me
I go to a little
it's hard
island
to
in
know when
Nigeria.
January's ever with
Only one.
anybody, so
Yes.
I guess you're in
Hopefully
front
it's
of
not
them.
food.
So you want, let me just see if it's the first or the second, I think.
So what are we thinking?
I think I got the
January
second
9th?
for them, okay,
think
that
so.
works.
January 9th, and that's our tentative date. Let's go with that one.
That's
Okay.
right.
Tentative.
I will add that in my calendar.
I can send you a calendar.
Okay. We're adjourned. Thanks, everyone.
Oh, well, hey, it's been fun, guys.
He's bugging out. So you're not gonna run?
You going
No,
somewhere?
no, 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 no.
Oh, wait till the camera's off.
He is running.